being in Germany for a little while, I was kind of getting used to people being like a little bit kind of standoffish with people they don't know. I mean, it's like super low key, reserved kind of attitudes. And then I went to the Netherlands and people were like, "Hey," and I was like, "Are you talking to me? Like, what do you mean? Hey, like, I didn't."
Taken aback.
Yeah, I was like, "Who are you talking?" Like, people were like smiling at me and stuff on the street, and I was like, "This is unusual." And so I just kind of assumed that Dutch people and German people like shared that kind of like cultural reservation, if you will. But they seemed a little bit more friendly. I don't know. Like, what was your experience with Dutch people living there for so long?
No, I think that's so funny because I can picture that between the Dutch people and the German people that I've met. I can picture this encounter all happening. I feel like I almost understand and understood talking to Dutch people about this because they would say internationally, lots of people would feel that way. We're very similar to German. Even the Dutch language is similar to German. It's a little bit softer, but it's similar. And it really did remind me sometimes of the way people think that Canadians are exactly like Americans. And there is a certain level of crossover because of proximity and culture and all that. And to make the comparison, like German and Dutch, there are some words that have a bit of crossover and stuff. You totally could like make these comparisons and see that. But then there are definitely differences as well and different cultural norms. And even though they seem like both of them maybe seem more similar together to a North American person, if you are a Dutch person, it feels totally different from their perspective. I would say in general that I always like was taken aback at first by the Dutch directness and the Dutch bluntness. And that's like the classic thing I feel you hear about Dutch people is that they're very direct and very blunt. So I suppose if a German is known to be more reserved, maybe a Dutch person is known to be a little bit more direct and blunt, which is kind of similar because they're like reserving their emotions. They're just speaking very directly and they're cutting to the point. But like that would come across so different to a North American person, definitely. So I think like as you're somewhere longer or as you just like meet more people from a culture, you would pick up on more of those nuances. And Dutch people, from my experience, their culture is reserved and it is orderly and it is very like efficient and all those things that you hear about. But there is certainly a quirky aspect to their culture as well that is fun and is super charming. And hearing about a Dutch person just saying, "Hey, hoi hoi," that sounds exactly like a Dutch person would do that as they were biking by, like saying hoi. So they are like quirky and not afraid to like show their interests in things as well, I found in my experience. So I'm sure that like comes from that place too. But that's funny.
In comparison to Canadians, what are some other like cultural differences with Dutch people?
I think that the bluntness and the directness is a big one just because it like informs a lot of how we act around people and our way and how Dutch people would act in society too. Because to compare that in Canada, Canadians are like known to be super friendly and known to be super approachable and chatty and talkative, which I think is very true and comes from a place where like to a Canadian, that's the highest thing that we want to be is nice and show care towards each other and be friendly and accommodating and aware of everyone. And in the Netherlands, they are trying to be aware of each other and be accommodating and be kind to people around them. The way that they do that is just so different. They will just not beat around the bush and they'll be blunt about something and tell you how they truly feel or tell you that your hair looks weird or something. Like a stranger on the bus in the Netherlands would say, "Oh my gosh, your hair is looking really weird from the back." And leave it at that, which is so shocking to someone from Canada, or was at least to me when I first moved there. And it just took me a minute to like readjust my brain to the fact that to them, that's exactly like the kindness they'd want to be shown in Canada. In Canada, we just would ignore that and try to redirect the conversation and not make them feel awkward about that. And I think a Dutch person would think like not pointing that out would be rude. So it just totally depends on how you look at things. The fact that the country is so much smaller does like change things culturally too, because I kind of touched on this before. When you're driving across Canada, it can be a long ways between places. So growing up, I would drive 4 or 5 hours with my family for a weekend trip. And that would be totally normal to like go 4 or 5 hours for a weekend. That was totally fine. In the Netherlands, even driving an hour or two for a weekend trip would be seen as like a very far distance and kind of crazy to go that far for such a short time. So like the fact that their country is so much smaller does just like change their perspective on things like that. I do think that there is a real like focus on like tolerance and acceptance through Dutch culture and Dutch history, which is actually similar to Canadian culture and like from kind of slightly different places. But the Netherlands has had a history of being very like tolerant legally and things like that, and tolerant through like drugs and LGBTQ rights and yeah, different historical perspectives. And Canada is like known to be very tolerant culturally and things like that. So I think we do share some of those things. And obviously in the Netherlands, they have a lot more bikes than in Canada. They have a lot more people cycling around there. That is definitely a difference as well.
Yeah, that's kind of a whole culture thing, isn't it? In the Netherlands, everyone has a bike.
Or multiple, I would say. Most people have multiple. They have their bad bike that just gets left at the office because it might get stolen. So they just use that. They have their nice bike that they use on the weekends. And then they have a bike that they just take to festivals. Like most people, it's a whole thing. And I felt like a true Dutch person once I had a bike in the Netherlands. You really feel like a new level of local once you actually have a bike there, I feel.